Coming up next, Francis and Friends. Francis and Friends is a production of the Sun Life Broadcasting Network. Email questions and comments for today's program to onair@jsm.org. Podcasts of previous programs can be listened to on our website at francisandfriends.com. In Hour 2, we welcome your phone calls regarding today's topic.
Well, welcome to Sun Life Broadcasting today. It's a thrill for us to be with you. I'm excited about the program today, and as well as I know that you are. I'm going to get right into it because we've got a lot of things to discuss. I'm going to introduce the panel. Jim Nations is with us today. Jim, good to have you.
Always great to be here.
Donnie is with us today.
Yes.
Donnie, did you have any announcements?
I do. I need to remind everyone that watches Sun Life Broadcasting on a regular basis. If you don't receive our monthly magazine, The Evangelist, you need to get your copy. Now, you can receive it absolutely free of charge for the first 6 months. I mean, absolutely free of charge. No cost, no obligation. And then, in the course of that 6 months, to keep it coming to you free, you just need to order something out of the magazine. We have page after page of special offers on product, and every time you order something, you get rolled over for another 6 months. And each month it contains an article by Dad, by Mother, by John Rosenstern, Gabe, myself, Lauren Larson. It will be information and material in here that you won't throw aside when you receive it, but you will read it each and every month. And you can sign up by going online at www.jsm.org or call the ministry, give them your name, address, and we'll start sending it to you. Now, when you sign up, it will take about 2 months before you receive your first issue, so don't get alarmed about that. But sign up today. I know that you'll enjoy receiving it.
And I'm going to introduce our special guest, and Donnie, Brother Clary is with us. And Donnie, I'm going to let you do, you know him better than I do. And he gave a tremendous testimony in church last night. Moving, it touched my heart.
Well, I met Johnny Lee Clary, of all places, in Australia. And we were both preaching in a conference in the Sunshine Coast of Australia. And when I heard his testimony begin to share with me what God had done in his heart as being coming from an Imperial Grand Wizard, and Mother forgot to turn her phone off again.
And I made a special point to do just that.
Live television, folks.
Yeah.
But when I heard his testimony of him being a former Imperial Wizard, Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, boy, did my antennas go up, being a Southerner. And I can remember, Mother, my first encounter with the Ku Klux Klan. I had an encounter, and I was right out of high school, come back home from my first year of Bible school, and we had a place down on Airline Highway here that had a flea market, and I don't know why I was there, but there was a McDonald's right next door, and I was eating, and I decided to walk to this flea market, and they had this booth set up, and I didn't know anything about Aryan Nations or KKK and all that stuff, and they had this nicely dressed guy handing out these free magazines, and I was walking by and he said, "Here, young man, you'll need to read this." And I took it, and it was really put together, fancy and nice, and I started opening it up, and it was anti-Semitic, it was anti-black, it was anti all this and this. And I remember turning around, walking back up to him, and I threw it on the floor in front of him and said, "I don't want your trash. Don't give that to me anymore." And needless to say, he gave me the dirtiest look anybody could ever give. But Johnny Lee Clary was in the KKK and saved out of the KKK by the blood of Jesus.
That was just tremendous. And you know, Brother Clary, what I'm going to do, because I know we have so many that are listening today that did not get to hear your testimony last night. And as you were giving it, I was writing down so many questions I wanted to ask you on this interview today. But I'm going to let you start because I had in my mind, before I ever heard your testimony, the very first question I was going to ask you, how could anyone join the KKK knowing what it stands for? And you answered that by what you were raised in, what your life was like, and how that you had hate poured into your heart from the time that you were just a little boy. And it reminded me so much of what we're facing with Islam and Christianity, because in the Arab countries, all of their children, they're indoctrinated in schools. They're indoctrinated in their, what is it? Their places of worship.
Mosque.
Mosque, thank you. In the mosque, to hate Jews and to hate Americans. And so I began to realize as it unfolded last night, no wonder you were following in your parents' footsteps. You were following in what you'd all been around and how you'd been raised in your life. It takes a lot for a person to come out of something that they have been in, their family was in, and to admit and see that they were wrong and to do a complete turnaround. We deal with that in all kind of false religions. They have been taught, say in the Catholic Church, that the Catholic Church is the only way to salvation, plus a lot of other things. And once they have been indoctrinated that from childhood up, it's so difficult for them to change their belief and to see the message, the true message of the Lord Jesus Christ. So I want to just start with your childhood, because that's an important foundation.
Well, you know, growing up in the Oklahoma, and Del City is where I was from, and the town was very segregated, very racially segregated, and I didn't even know that there was black people till I was 5 years old. And the first time I ever saw a black person, I was with my daddy in front of the grocery store, and the black man was carrying his groceries out of the store, and I said, "Look, Daddy, there goes a chocolate-covered man." And I'm jumping up and down the car seat going, "Oh, chocolate man." And my dad said, "Boy," and my dad was exactly like Archie Bunker on All in the Family, looked like him, talked like him, acted like him. And my dad said, he took a puff on that cigar and he said, "Boy, that is not a chocolate-covered man." And he used a racial slur to describe the man. And when he said that word, he planted the seed of hate inside my heart. And it wasn't just him. My grandfather, he told me, so you might have to work with them, but by gosh, at the end of the day, don't you be around those people. And my grandfather hated them, and I mean, it was just, and it wasn't just my family either. All the kids in the neighborhood, you know, we would play the game Tag You're It, and instead of saying Tag You're It, it would be Tag You're the black person, you know, and everybody would scream, "I don't want to be the black person." And so these are the kind of things that was being taught by the parents to all their kids. And the Bible tells us, Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is older, he will not depart from it. And so what happens is that parents have to make a choice. They either choose to teach their kids the ways of hate,
Right.
or they choose to teach their kids the ways of love. And unfortunately, my family chose to train me up in the ways of hatred.
Yeah, and you had a terrible upbringing. Not only just your mom passing away, at what age?
Well, now, my daddy died when I was 11, and my mom died about 10 years later of alcoholism.
Okay.
And Daddy was a hard-working man. Now, yes, he was racist and things like that, and he never joined the Klan, but his brother in Georgia did. And I would hear about the Ku Klux Klan.
But he took care of his family. He worked hard.
Yes, he worked hard. He was a Golden Gloves boxer. He had fought 75 fights and won 74 by knockouts, and they offered him a contract to turn pro, of course. And his first wife told him, "If you do, I'll take your kids and you'll never see them again." And so what my dad did, he chose not to fight. Well, she ended up divorcing him anyway and took the kids, and he never saw them. So he married my mom and had 4 more kids by my mom and started fresh and anew. But yet my mother, she was an alcoholic, and she drank. I mean, my memories of my mom was sitting there popping a top on a can of beer all the time, or drinking whiskey, and she was constantly drinking because she and Wanda Jackson were very good friends, and most people would know Wanda Jackson if they was around the country music scene. And her and Wanda sang on the radio together, and Wanda made it big time, and my mom got a contract too, but my mom drank it away. She used to sing with Conway Twitty and Hank Thompson and people like that, but she drank it all away. And then she was cheating on my father constantly, and my dad would have to work out of town because he was a foreman of a painting company. He made very good money, but he'd be gone for several days, and Mama would leave us kids and take off and run down to the bars, catch a cab, go to the bar, and lay out with some guy for a long time. And Daddy'd come home and he'd hunt the bars down, find the guy, beat the guy half to death, and then drag my mom home and hit her, cops being called out to the house. So this is a kind of upbringing
That's
that I
terrible.
had.
Oh my!
And it wasn't a good one at all.
No.
And
but
I
too
went
many
to
children are being raised like that today.
Yeah.
That's what our problem in this nation
That's
is.
why alcohol, when you have alcohol in the home, you know, and people start, I've seen what it does to people. It destroys people, and it tears them apart. And my mother, she did not stop drinking, and she ended up drinking so much and running around. She drove my father into bankruptcy, and my father was faced with losing everything that he had worked all of his life for. And when I was 11 years old, I watched my father take a .45 caliber pistol and put it to his head and blow the whole top of his head off with it. And so
what a mark to leave in a child's mind. That had to torment you.
Oh, it did. But you know, at the time, nobody seemed to care. You know, right after the funeral, my mother moved her new boyfriend into my father's home. And when I protested, this guy was 6'8" and weighed about 300 pounds. And I was an 11-year-old kid, and he hit me with his fist and sent me sailing. I went to the police. The police came out to the house and told my mom, said, if this thug lays another hand on this boy, you're all going to jail. And my mother told me, he told my mom, he said, you choose between this brat or me. And my mom says, I don't care where you go or what you do, but you get out of my house.
Oh my.
And I said, well, where am I going to go? I'm 11 years old. She says, I don't care, you fat little so-and-so, but you get out of here. And so she sent my little brother to go live with my grandparents. And my grandfather didn't want me. He said, I'll take the good kid, but Johnny's been a bad kid since the day he was born. I don't want nothing to do with him. And I heard that, you know, and that has a, you know, I felt with a rejection there. And then my sister, she was the only relative that said, all right, come on out here. And I got on a bus and went to California, 1,500 miles away, making a trip at 11 years old. And I get out to California, and of course I first got out there, I seen like a whole new family. I had all these cousins and everything, but then they moved away to Northern California, and I was left without any friends. My sister, she left her husband. She had married at 16 years old just to get out of the house, get away from my parents. And so then she left her husband and took up with some thug that was 20 years older than her. And they took my money. I would get a monthly check from my father's death, and they took all my money and spent it on drugs. And I was living in the ghetto of East L.A., and I came from a nice home. I mean, my dad had a lot of money, and now I had to go without. And I mean, and that was a big thing to me. And kids
big adjustment to make.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it was. I mean, I was poor and being bullied at school, and gangs living right next door, having shootouts with other gangs, and people hit the deck, bullets flying everywhere. You know, it's a wonder that I didn't get hit. You know, with and the cops wouldn't even come into the neighborhood unless they came in SWAT teams, and that's how bad it was. And today, it's listed as one of the worst neighborhoods that people can live in East Los Angeles.
How did you get out?
Well, I was 14 years old, and I was thinking about committing suicide because I didn't feel like I had any hope whatsoever. I turned on the TV, and unfortunately, there was a guy named David Duke on TV who was the head of the KKK, and he was saying some of the same things that my father had said. And I wrote down the address that he gave, and I wrote him a letter and told him the things that I'd gone through, and he responded by sending me all kinds of hate literature, which caused me to have bad dreams at night. And this hate literature was, I mean, it was teaching me to hate people that never done anything to me. There was the, like I didn't even know what a Jew was. I never even heard the term Jew, I don't believe, until then. And he would send comic books that he had made of rats wearing Jewish yarmulkes and wearing the Star of David, and saying that they controlled the media and they controlled the public schools and all this kind of stuff, and that they were out to destroy the white race by promoting racial integration and by promoting the mixing of the races. And so I started reading that, and he said the Jews killed Jesus, and he would say things like that in the literature. So we're supposed to hate the Jews because they're all children of the devil. Now this is the garbage that he was telling me, okay? And I started having bad dreams at night. When most kids would dream about, you know, playing football or cowboys and Indians or something, I was having nightmares in the middle of the night about black people burning down towns. A few days later, I got a knock on the door, and David Duke sent a man to follow up. And this man knocked on the door, said he was a friend of David Duke's. He was about my father's age. he shakes my hand, and he comes in and gives me all kinds of paraphernalia and more literature and says, "You're smart, you're intelligent, young man." He says, "Mr. Duke read your letter, sent me to talk to you." He goes, "You need a family. Your problem is no kid should go through what you've gone through, and you need a family." He said the word Ku Klux Klan comes from the Greek word kuklas, which means circle, and clan from Scotland means family. We stand for circle of family. Come join us. We're going to be your family. We'll take care of you. Well, they started. I immediately, nobody wanted anything to do with me. I was the kid that nobody wanted. And then all of a sudden that this cult, and that's why I tell churches today, I said, my gosh, those youth out there are crying out for encouragement, not discouragement. And if we as a church don't get out there and encourage these young people, groups like the Klan will be glad to encourage them for us and get them involved in the cult. Because they know the youth of today will decide what kind of world we live in tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is I made the wrong choice to join the Klan at 14 years old. They came and got me, started taking me to meetings, giving me more literature, and I finally left California and I moved back to Oklahoma, finished school and started going to college, and by then I was ingrained in it, and I started going to David Duke's rallies and bodyguarding.
Well, you know, it sounds like that you had people that came and wrapped themselves around you and started acting like they were caring for you, which you never had in your life, and you had friends.
Yeah, because nobody wanted to be my friend, but the Klan did. And when they reached out to me and was my false friend, you know, and that's why people get involved in these cults and everything, because you know, look how, you know, when they followed that Jim Jones character in the People's Temple and things like that, he wasn't someone who mistreated them. He acted like he cared about them and always giving them things, and people, you know, got involved in that. And that's the same thing they do with the Klan, the neo-Nazis, the Aryan Nations. They're all onto this, and they really target the youth, and they say, we care about you, we encourage you, we love you, and all that. And people listen to this. David Duke acted like he was the most caringest person in the world, but the only thing that Duke really cared about was his own self and promoting his agenda. And
that was my next question. Incidentally, you have a website.
Yes, ma'am.
Brother Carey, and I want you to give it to the people. Clary, I'm sorry, but I want you to give it to the people, because as I understand it, you write about more of this on your website.
Yes.
And if you want to, you need to go read what he has to say. Give it to us right now.
It's www.xkkk.org or johnnyleeclary.com. Okay, and it's just JOHNNYLEECLARY.com, or you can just put xkkk.org and it's the same website and it'll take you there.
Okay, I want to talk about David Duke for just a moment, because he ran for governor here in this here in the state of Louisiana. And my husband and I was a young married couple at the time, and there was so many people here, so many churches that was actually behind him.
Well, that wasn't that long ago. That was in the 80s.
Well,
it was in 91, actually.
Yeah. Actually, 91.
And 92, he ran for president the next year.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, what shocked me was that was not somebody that my husband and I would even consider in that position, because we saw the problems. But there were churches right here in this town.
Yes.
There were churches all over the state that actually got behind this man and promoted him for governor of the state of Louisiana. But once you got involved, you got on the inside, you got around him, and those that were closest to him, what did you see?
Well, when I became his bodyguard, see, now I looked at Duke, I was kind of looked at him as a hero, okay, as a kid. And I was, you know, I'd been studying him and stuff, but then when I started going to his Klan rallies, we were attacked by a group called INCAR, which was the International Committee Against Racism. They were a communist front group, and they came out and attacked the Klan, and I fought them, and I took some of them down, and the Klan liked that. And so Louis Beam, who was the head, he was the head of the Klan in Texas, but he was head of security for David Duke. He grabbed me and said, "You're going to bodyguard Duke." And so I started bodyguarding David, okay, and what happened was, I seen a whole different David. Now, I'm watching him give speeches, and he's waving a Bible around in his hand, and he's telling people, he's saying, I stand for Christian morals. I'm in this for my children and for my wife, and that's the only reason I put my life on the line, because I care about you. I care about you so much. And yet, he turns right around after the meeting, he goes, hey, where's all the women at? you know, and stuff. And next thing you know, I mean, blondes, brunettes, redheads, daughters, sisters, grandmothers, all fair game. And I watched him take these Klansmen's wives who were putting their lives on the line for him. He'd take their wives into the hotel room with him and stuff like that and spend the night with them and all this kind of garbage. And it was sickening me. And I finally confronted him with it. And we had a big battle in Texarkana, Arkansas, and that's when I left him and went with his rival in Denham Springs, which was Bill Wilkinson, who took 3/4 of Duke's members away because people were getting tired of this with Duke. And of course Duke would come out on the stage and he'd tell about what good shape he's in and lift weights and say, the reason your wives won't look at you is because you don't look as good as me, and that's why they're looking at me. He was so hung up on himself it was unreal. And but what happened was, when Duke ran for governor, and he got, you know, he unseated Buddy Roemer here. And
we got the Republican nomination.
He got the Republican nomination. It's absolutely correct. And he took 40% of the vote in Louisiana.
And that was the first time, you know, I registered to vote at 18. This was 91. That's the first time I ever voted for a Democrat for governor of the state of Louisiana, because I voted for Edwin Edwards. And I don't know if you remember or not, but the week before the election, he bought statewide an hour's worth of time right before Sunday evening churches would start. That's back when churches were still going on, having Sunday evening services. And he gets up and tells everybody, I'm a born-again Christian and I've renounced my past and all this stuff. And I was preaching that night, and I sat there and watched it intently, and I remember telling Debbie, I said, that man is lying through his teeth. I said, I could feel the spirit of Satan around him. And you don't remember, but that night I got up and I just told everybody, I said, I can't tell you who to vote for because the law would come and get me. And I said, you know, I'm not supposed to endorse candidates, but I said, I know most of you watch David Duke on TV. And I said, no true born-again believer can vote for a racist liar. And that's what I said. And I said, and that's all I'm saying.
You had that Holy Ghost discernment, you know, and saw it, because I guarantee you, when he ran for governor, and I got a phone call from a civil rights group down here that wanted me to come to Louisiana, hold a press conference, and warn the people about him. But I didn't feel like I should come to Louisiana and get involved in politics, okay, at the time. And I was still pretty new in the ministry myself, and I don't know if I want to do that, but I probably should have and everything. Yeah. But the thing about it is that I was watching television, and this is sad. Now, you mentioned, even right here in this city, there is a, and I'm not going to name names, but there's a pastor right outside of Baton Rouge or somewhere around here, and a pretty big church from what I understand, and he came to Tulsa and spoke at ORU at a church there, and he got up at a conference and said, David Duke is a born-again Christian, and we're going to have a Christian governor in Louisiana. And he started just bragging on Duke, and I about fell out of my chair, because I had been paying attention to this, and I knew all these people around Duke. Okay, I can name the names right now, but I'm not going to. But I knew the people, and they were all around David Duke, and when he told his press conferences and stuff, working on his campaign and giving interviews, and I said, these are known Klans ladies and Klansmen, men and women both that were in the Klan. And I said, I know these people are in the Klan, so where was all the black people? Duke, if you notice when he ran, he didn't have black people surrounding him and wanting to get him in office. He was hanging around. You know, when you become born again, old things are passed away. That's and all things become as new. And he had those old things all around him, and I saw this. And I said, this guy has not changed. And I knew that he was lying and he was deceiving the people, just like you, God showed you through the Holy Spirit. And so I was just appalled, and I called this church, and I said, and I was going there at the time at this church up in Tulsa, and I talked to the pastor's office, and I said, we got to do something. I said, you let this guy get up and tell him he's born again. They go, well, how do you know he isn't? And I said, you just trust me, I know on this. And I started explaining what I knew, and they gave me this pastor's phone number, and I called him up at his hotel and talked to him. And he said, I swear to you, I know that Duke is born again. And I said to him, I said, how much time did you spend with Duke? He goes, well, I actually met him at a conference of pastors that he came to talk to. And he goes, and I spoke to him personally for about 5 or 10 minutes. And I said, so in 5 or 10 minutes, you can tell me for a fact you know this man's life. He goes, well, no, I don't think anybody do that, but. And I said, no, there's no buts about it. I said, I know this guy. When I got to telling him what I knew, he said, well, I guess I probably might have been wrong, but he never corrected that. And that was sad, you know, because a lot of people were jumping all over me saying, you're not giving this guy a chance. People are giving you a chance, but you're not giving David Duke a chance. You won't return the favor.
You know, you just said something here that I have been warning this audience about ever since this election started for the President of the United States. The Christian public is looking for a Christian to run for public office, and there's nothing wrong with that. But anybody can step up to the forefront and say, I'm a born-again Christian.
And the church just falls for
Or
it.
pray a prayer in public, and no one looks at them. I mean, look, we had Jimmy Carter.
Yes.
He won the election with good Christian people voting for him. And the man's not even saved. He was biased and prejudiced, and I think the verdict is still out whether he's really an American.
He was the
And you have
terrible president.
and you have the same thing in this election. Everybody is looking for that born again Christian instead of looking at what each one of these men stand for. It would be wonderful if we got somebody that loved the Lord. But, you know, I maintain, and this is just my opinion, I don't think you can get to be president of the United States and being a born again Christian, because there's too much compromise along the way. And so this is just a stern warning, what we're discussing here today. When a person, anybody, gets up and says, I'm a born-again Christian, that doesn't mean that they are. It does their lifestyle back it up. Does what they vote for in public office and what they stand for. That's what we look at. And we judge them by their fruits, not by their words. So you brought up an important thing right here. And we're going to have to pause for a quick break. We're going to be back right after the break.
We're glad you can join us today for Francis and Friends. We'll be right back on the Sun Life Broadcasting Network.
Francis and Friends is a production of the Sun Life Broadcasting Network. Email questions for today's program to onair@jsm.org. You can also visit our website at francisandfriends.com.
Okay, we're back, and amid all the questions that I want to ask him, I'm thinking of so many, I want to get to his testimony, and it's so powerful, so I'm going to let you continue.
Well, my testimony, as I got back to Oklahoma, I started organizing, and, you know, and like I said, when I found out what Duke was all about, I went with Bill Wilkinson, who was his rival Klan leader, and took over 3/4 of Duke's members from him and opened up a headquarters in Denham Springs, Louisiana. He had the mayor of Denham Springs at the time come out and cut the ribbon on the building and did this big celebration. And Wilkinson began to get national attention, and he coordinated me as the leader of Oklahoma. And I became the spokesperson in Oklahoma, which was the state public relations man, Kliegel. And at that point, I'm doing interviews all over the place, and I thought I was important because I had media calling me nearly every day. I was either in the newspaper, on the radio, or on TV. I was recognized everywhere, and I was the kid that everybody said would never amount to anything, and I thought this was making me important. What I didn't realize was I was just being used as a patsy in the Klan, because people had jobs. There was cops who belonged to the Klan and business people and things, and they didn't want it to get out that they were members of the Klan because they was liable to lose their job, especially policemen. So they thought, hey, this is who we need. This guy's willing to get out there and tell everybody, because they had to have somebody that they could talk to.
As their spokesperson.
And so I thought it made me important, but I was just being an ignorant, stupid person by doing what I was doing. And so during this time, I got a telephone call to appear on a radio show. And this was a national radio show that was heard all over the country. And I agreed to be on there, but what they didn't tell me is they invited a black civil rights worker to be on the show, and he was the pastor of a black Baptist church in Oklahoma. He was a friend of Dr. Martin Luther King's. His name was Reverend Wade Watts. And he's the uncle, you probably heard of J.C. Watts,
Yes.
who was the congressman. He was J.C.'s uncle.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they invited him to come be on the show, and I was thinking, I stereotyped all black people. And I thought that the only blacks that I had any run-ins with are the ones that would protest the Klan rallies. And they would come out, usually the Black Panthers and the militants. So I'm expecting a black militant to show up and start cussing me and yelling at me and telling me how bad he hated whites. I thought he'd have a great big afro and a great big button on that said, I hate whitey and all this stuff. And I was in total shock when a nicely dressed black gentleman, older man, walked into the studio carrying a Bible. And he puts his hand out to me and he goes, hello, Mr. Clary. He goes, I'm Reverend Wade Watts, and I just came here to tell you that I love you and Jesus loves you.
Oh.
And that caught me off guard. And he's shaking my hand, and I realized I just broke a Klan rule, because the Klan forbids you to shake hands with black people. And I pulled my hand back, and I started looking at my hand, because that was the first black person I had ever touched. And I'm checking my hand out and everything, and he goes, oh, don't worry, Johnny, it won't come off. And I started calling him names. I said, you no good, sorry so-and-so, you. And he looked at me and he goes, God bless you. And I said, I hate you. And he goes, Jesus loves you. And he goes, and I do too. And no matter what I did to him, the man just kept responding with kindness, and he'd smile at me. And whenever I'd insult him, he'd sit there and smile and laugh, you know, and stuff. And he wasn't letting me get to him. And this was making an impact on me, you know, because I didn't know how to deal with this. I was looking for hate. Hate feeds off hate. Yeah. Proverbs 10:12. Hatred stirs up dissension, but love covers all multitudes of sins. And all of a sudden, you know, I wanted him to respond with hate, but he wouldn't get down on my level. He showed he was the better person because he had the power of God operating through him. And I mean, he asked me questions. I mean, you know, I told him, I said, white people are smarter than black people. He goes, where do you draw that assertion from? And I go, that what? He goes, assertion. He goes, that means idea. And I said, well, and I told him, I said, 2 professors from Yale and Harvard made a test that they distributed across America to white children and to black children. And they said the average black child scored 15% lower than the average white child. And it proves that whites are more intelligent. And he goes, well, Johnny, what color were the men who made this test? And I said, well, what difference does that make? He goes, I'll give you a test right now, and I don't think you could pass it. And I said, okay, ask me some questions. I'll show you. He goes, how long does it take a mess of chitlins to cook? He says, right. How do you straighten out an afro? And I said, okay, that's enough. He goes, what's a hog mow? You know, I said, that's a hog's mother, you know, and all that stuff. And so these type of things. And I said, you've rigged this test. You're asking me questions that whites wouldn't know in order to purposely flunk a white person. He goes, bingo. He goes, now you're catching on. He goes, what makes you think your 2 white professors didn't do that to try to make black people all appear stupid? And so, you know, and you start thinking when people ask you questions like that. And I couldn't whip him there, so I went into history with him. And I said to him, I said, let me ask you this. I said, the greatest president that ever lived in my books was Thomas Jefferson, who was the founder of this country. And Thomas Jefferson said the 2 races cannot get along. It's best to repatriate all the blacks back to Africa. He goes, do you admire him? And is that somebody you would want your child to be like? I said, absolutely. And he goes, well, can you tell me who Sally Hemings is? And I said, I never heard of Sally Hemings. He goes, well, that was the mother of 6 of his children and his mistress, who happened to be a slave woman who happened to be black. And he goes, and he said, so for someone who said the races can't get along, he said somebody was doing some integrating somewhere to have them children. And so then I went to the Bible. And I couldn't get him with history, and so I decided to go to the Bible. And I said, God forbids blacks and whites to have anything to do with each other. And he says, what do you mean God forbids? And I said, well, there's a scripture in the Bible, and I don't know where it is, but it says, what fellowship hath light with darkness? And that means blacks and whites stay away. Now, I heard this from David Duke, and that shows how dumb David Duke really is. He's supposed to be so intelligent, but David Duke always used that, you know, and all that. And he goes, Johnny, that's not what that means at all. He goes, if you go to 2 Corinthians 1:14, it says, or 6:14, I'm sorry. He says, what fellowship had the believer with the non-believer? Right. What fellowship has sin with righteousness? What fellowship hath Jesus with Baal? What fellowship hath light with darkness? Come out from among them and remain separate. It's talking about spiritual matters. Old things are passed away, all things become as new. He's not talking about blacks and whites. And he goes, and you don't think the races ought to mix? And I said, absolutely not. And he goes, well, have you ever heard of a man by the name of Moses? And I said, of course I've heard of Moses. And he goes, what color did you say an Ethiopian is? I go, well, they're black because they're from Africa, but don't you tell me Moses was a black person. I said, because every picture I've ever seen of Moses that they painted of him, he was white. And he goes, well, I don't care about any picture. What I'm telling you, in Numbers 12, Moses married an Ethiopian black woman. And when his sister, who was a lot like you, Mr. Clary, she'd have probably joined your organization. And when she spoke out against it, God put a disease on her and said, well, if you really like being white, I'll really make you white. And he put a disease on her called leprosy and turned her as white as could be. And that was for just speaking against her. He said, so you can imagine what God's going to do to you if you don't stop this Ku Klux Klan nonsense. And so this had a huge impact on me, you know. And so when the debate was over, I walked out into the lobby. And as I walked out into the lobby, he says, Mr. Clary, I got somebody I want you to meet. And I said, well, you know, who's that? And he holds up a little baby. And the baby was half white and half black. And his wife was holding the baby. He goes, Mr. Clary, this little baby here, her father was black and the mother was white, and they were teenagers, got themselves in trouble. The parents of the black boy said, we're not raising no white babies in our home. And the parents of the white girl said, we're not raising no black babies in our home. He said, this little baby was being rejected by both races simply because of the color of her skin. And he says, so he said, you know, this is really sad. He said, because he said, this little baby shouldn't be rejected over that. Right. He said, so what happened was, he said, I said, if y'all don't want the baby, give me the baby, I'll take her. And so they gave me the baby, and he goes, I went down there and I adopted her. This is my baby now. He said, now, Mr. Clary, I took her by choice. Right. And he goes, and I want to ask you something. Mr. Clary, look at this little baby. How can you hate this baby? This little baby, she don't hate you. And I looked at the baby looked right back at me, and then the baby smiled at me. And as I saw that baby smiling, for a second, I almost wanted to reach out and go, oh, look at that cute little smile. Then I remembered who I was. I go, get away from me. He almost had me on that one. Yeah. And then I said, get away from me. And I started walking away, and he said something very profound. He said, Mr. Clary, always remember this. No matter what you say to me, no matter what you do to me, you can't do enough to me to make me hate you. I'm going to love you, and I'm going to pray for you, whether you like it or not.
Wow. What was your reaction when he said that?
I didn't know what to say. Pastor Donahue, I did not have any idea what to say when he said that. I just kind of hung my head. The faster I could get away from him, the better, you know, because I knew he had the best of me. And it bugged me. It bothered me. And after that, the Klan said, don't you worry about a thing. We're going to make him pay for it. Well, he's going to learn not to smart off to a white man and all that. And so the Klan went by his house, and they burned a cross across the street from his house. Now, most of the time, that would put fear in any black person's life. And the Klan, when they burn a cross on someone's lawn, and if you ask a Klansman why they burn the cross.
Yeah, I'd like to know that.
Would you like to know that?
Yeah, I'd like to know that.
If you ask a Klansman, why do you guys burn the cross? The Klan will say, we don't burn them, we light them, and it means Jesus is the light of the world, and through him he removes all darkness. And he goes, and it's the oldest symbol of Christianity dating back to the early centuries in Scotland. Well, here's the problem with that. I went to Scotland, and I've been to Scotland 3 times on tour preaching in churches all over Scotland, and I could not find one person in Scotland who could tell me that the Klan ever burned, or that the Scottish people ever burned crosses. They go, the only time we've heard of a burning cross is when the Klan does it in America. So the Klan made this up, okay, obviously. Well, anyway, the Klan, and besides that, even if that was true, that they do it out of religious thing, when you burn one on someone's lawn, that's not practicing religion.
No.
That's threatening them. And the Klan knows it. And they're saying that means get out of town or we're going to come back and see you. And they put little cards out that says you have been paid a visit. They'll put it on the windshield of your car. It said you have been paid a visit from the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. Don't make the next visit a business call.
The white Knights of the Ku Klux Klan.
Or the white Knights, yeah, the white Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And so anyway, that's how they would do this. Well, anyway, they burned this cross on Reverend Watts's lawn to scare him. And what does he do? God didn't give him the spirit of fear, but one of power, love, and a sound mind. He walked out there and hollered at the Klan. He goes, hey, would you boys like some hot dogs and marshmallows to go with your barbecue? He goes, and it must be hot around that fire. I got some iced tea for you if you want some. And they all turned around and left, you know. Then they came back one night marching around with the white sheets and hoods on in front of the house. And he came out and said, you boys are early. Halloween's 4 more months away. He goes, I don't have no candy for you, but if you come back in October, I'll give you some candy. And so they turned around and left again. And I called him up. on the phone. I said, I'm going to show you how to scare this guy. And I called him up on the phone and disguised my voice, and I go, boy, you don't know who this is, but we're watching you. We're coming to see you real soon. Be afraid, boy. And he goes, hello, Johnny. He goes, a man like you takes the time to call me. I am so honored. He goes, now let me do something for you. He goes, dear Lord Jesus, poor Johnny wants attention. Would you please touch his heart? And there's a good boy in there trying to come out, and please bring him out of that mess, Lord. And I hung up the phone on him. Yeah. And I said, how dare you, you know, and stuff. And I was really getting upset. Sure. But whatever we did to Wade Watts, he responded with love. And,
wow.
That's what Christians are supposed to do, yes.
In reality, he was turning the other cheek.
Sure.
He was. He was. Now, there were times he called the highway patrol. You know, when the Klan got out of hand and made threats against his kids and stuff, no man has to take that.
Exactly.
And he did have a shotgun and stuff, and he more than one occasion he grabbed that gun.
Now you shared though a story last night that just it stuck with me all night about the barbecue restaurant.
Oh yeah.
And Brother Watts, tell that.
It was Pete's Barbecue on Highway. It still stands today as far as I know. I ain't been to McAllister in a while, but Pete's Barbecue on Highway 270 in McAllister, Oklahoma. The scenario was Reverend Watts went in there for lunch one day, and we were doing some Klan activities there. We were pretty well steeped there in McCurtain County. And what happened was we used those CB radios to communicate back and forth, and I heard the breaker 19, and they said, hey, we got a surprise for you. Reverend Watts was just seen going into Pete's Barbecue. I said, meet me there. Well, we had about 30 of us get there in no time at all, and we walked in there, and you could have heard a pin drop. People knew who we was, and they didn't mess with us. Now, the thing is, most of the people in the town wasn't Klansmen, but they wouldn't unify and stand up to the Klan, so 30 or 40 thugs was running a town, a county of 40,000 people.
Right.
And so that's how these gangs operate, you know. Stand up to them, you know. You got them outnumbered.
That's right.
And everything, but we walked into there.
Well, let's stop right there.
Okay.
We got them outnumbered. That's the problem with America today. The church has laid down.
Exactly.
And we're letting our president steal our rights and our privileges and trying to change the Constitution. And the church is trying to get gold and silver instead of standing up for our rights.
That's right. Exactly.
I still maintain and always maintain if the church stood up and took to the streets of our nation's capital, I'm not talking about burning and all that kind of stuff, but just stand up as a united mass of people saying, we're not going to take this. You're not going to take the Bible out of school. You're not going to tell us we can't speak the name of Jesus. You're not going to do this. It would open the eyes of all politicians fear is votes.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the church is the laziest element of people in the whole, but as far as getting involved in political affairs, and I'm speaking more just voting, but I mean standing up and letting our politicians know we're going to hold you accountable. And if you don't vote, you know, we've got this, you know, activist judge in California that just overruled the second vote in California that the citizens of California voted against gay marriage. And a judge overturned it and said it was unconstitutional. No, he's unconstitutional. What happened to the will of the people? And what I maintain is there should have been 50,000 Christians after that ruling on his courthouse steps saying, we're not going to take this. That's the only thing that they fear. So y'all walked in and took over that restaurant for that little bit. And what?
You could have heard the pin drop, and Reverend Watson just trying to eat his lunch and by himself. Now, that's real brave. 30 or 40 of us going in there, about 30 of us going in there and harassing one old black man, you know. And he's sitting there trying to eat his lunch. Now, when they integrated the restaurants in the 1960s and made it illegal to say you can't serve someone on the basis of race, the way that the white racists throughout especially down in the South, would get rid of black people in the restaurants is walk up and say, whatever you do to that food on your plate, we will do the same thing to you. And the blacks would get up and leave. You know, they didn't want no problems. So I decided I'd seen this happen over and over, and I'd heard so much about it, and I said, I'll try that. I'll fix him. So I walked up and surrounded him at the table, and I said, we don't want you here. I said, whatever you do to that food there on your plate, I promise you we will do the same thing to you that you do to that food. And he had some chicken there on his plate. So he picked up the chicken and he kissed it. And when he kissed that chicken, everybody in the whole restaurant started laughing, including the Ku Klux Klan. And they were laughing. They go, sorry, boss, but that was funny. He got you there. Yeah. And I said, you guys get outside. I'm going to take your sheets away from you. I said, you're going to go on suspension laughing at me. He made a fool out of me. They go, sorry, but it was funny. And I'm arguing with the Klan outside and forgot all about Reverend Watts because I was frustrated. Yeah. And I heard a horn honk, and Reverend Watts is driving off, and he's waving. He goes, bye, Klan. He goes, bye, Johnny, and all that. And we never bothered Wade Watts again. I didn't want to fool with that man after that.
Well, we're coming up in a few minutes to the second hour where we'll be taking phone calls, and I want the people to hear how you got saved.
Okay. Well, what happened was I had fell from grace in the Klan. I had risen all the way to the top of the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan and became the National Imperial Wizard. And what had happened is that I thought I had the world by the tail, and I had a girlfriend that turned out to be a federal informant for the FBI. And she was sent in by the FBI to pretend to be my girlfriend, get close to me, and get all the information she could. I had no idea. I refused to open my eyes and see that she was a federal informant, and I told her everything. I told her the names of all the people who were back in the Klan. I showed her the secret Klan meeting places. I showed her everything. She turned that over to the FBI, and people started getting visited on their jobs. Cops that were in the Klan started getting fired, and things like that, because I told her who all the people were, gave her the mailing list, and then she fled into the Federal Witness Protection Program. Well, the Klan didn't trust me after that. They started saying that I should have known that she was an informant, and they said, how do we know you're not an informant? How do we know you're not a communist working for the Communist Party and all that? And so things just went from bad to worse. I ended up leaving the KKK. I could not, I walked away from it. I started drinking heavily. I was trying to get a job, and I was also a pro wrestler. I used to wrestle on TV under the name of Johnny Angel.
I can't picture that now. Johnny, I've known you since the 90s. I could not picture you as a professional wrestler.
I got the videos to prove it.
Well, I think we may have some pictures of that they could put on the screen.
Well, that's me with Nature Boy Buddy Landell and Ricky Morton of the Rock and Roll Express, and there's Johnny Angel right between them, and stuff.
You picked the name Johnny Angel.
Yeah, I picked Johnny Angel and all that stuff, and got a nasty letter from Shelley Fabre, who recorded that song. That's another story now. But anyway, what happened is that I lost my career in pro wrestling. I lost my friends and everything, and the Klan wanted nothing to do with me, and they were making threats toward me, the Nazis and the skinheads. I just sunk into a deep oblivion.
Now, you said, before we get to that, you said that toward the end of your tenure as the leader, you started noticing the neo-Nazi and the skinhead movement begin to rise up in America and begin to come into league with the KKK. And that was shocking to you.
It was shocking to me because I wasn't used to Nazis and skinheads, and they would take their children and they would have them sing songs that Hitler, they had little kids stand there and sing about Hitler was a great man, we praise you, Adolf Hitler.
Well, we have there's I'm sure you know in the news of this family, this white supremacist family that named their child Hitler.
Yeah, and they was talking about taking the kids away
from them. Well, they took the children away from them because they called them unfit parents, and they were. Yeah, anybody that would name their child Hitler is an unfit parent.
Don't deserve to have a kid.
They don't have enough brains to live.
Absolutely. And this is what the Klan, they got involved with the Nazis and skinheads, and I didn't like Nazis and skinheads. They were tattooing swastikas on their forehead and coming up to me saying, what do you think? And I go, I think you better get used. I said, you looking for a job? I think you better get used to saying, would you like fries with that burger for the rest of your life? I said, because you've just done messed up your whole life. How stupid is that? Put a swastika on your forehead,
Right.
And this is what these people were doing, and talking about white revolution is the only solution, and teaching kids how to make bombs. They had paramilitary training camps. They robbed National Guard armories, and they were stealing stuff and everything and getting ready what they called a race war. They had barrels of cyanide that they was storing up that they wanted to dump into black water supply systems in major cities to start poisoning black people and all that,
How terrible.
This is the kind of stuff that they had, and I could not go along with this kind of stuff. Right. And it was, I had a conscience about me, you know. And I think the reason that I had a conscience, because when I was a little kid, I'd gone to church. And I had given my heart to Jesus when I was 9 years old, but after my daddy did what he did, I walked away, you know, and stuff. And
well, what brought you back? What you told it last night.
Well, during this time, during all the time that I was with, and you know, I have to admit that when I was going to the bars and honky tonking and Ku Klux Klaning, I might have a hangover on a Sunday morning, but I found this preacher that caught my attention on television and back in the 80s, and I mean, he was absolutely, I could not quit watching him, and it was Jimmy Swaggart. And I'm sitting there watching him, and the Klan would call for business, and I'd say, you know better than to call me on Sunday mornings? I'd have a hangover and everything, so I'm trying to hear the preacher. And they go, who is that you listen to on Sunday mornings? I go, Jimmy Swaggart. And they go, why do you listen to him for? He always makes people feel guilty and bad about themselves, you know? So, you know, I said, I like to hear what he has to say, you know, and I was listening, and I started questioning things, because I would hear Brother Swaggart preach, and I would sit there and I would take notes and everything, and I started wondering, I thought, man, you know, how could this be? And the Klan says this, and this is totally different from what Jimmy Swaggart's saying and all that, and I started questioning a lot of things, and so that he helped plant that seed. Isaiah 55:11, God's word never returns void.
Right.
My little grandmother, Christian woman, I called her Nan. She was on her knees praying for me constantly, you know, and stuff. I'd tell her about the Klan. She goes, why don't you get out of that Klan? I'd say, because the Klan are the true Christians. And she'd go, I'll just go pray for you. And she'd get on her knees and say, God, please forgive my grandson for being so stupid. And all that stuff. And she kept praying for me. Prayers of the righteous availeth much.
That's right.
You know, and so and thank God she prayed for me. And so people were planting seeds. Reverend Watts, he planted seeds by the way that he handled me and things like that. And so I got all the way to the top, fell from the top. I couldn't get after I left the Klan, I couldn't get a job. When I did get a job, I'd be selling cars maybe for a week or two. Somebody would recognize me and they'd let me go. They said, well, you're too much heat. We know who you are. You got to go. Wrestling wouldn't even talk to me anymore. I had lost my career in wrestling. I started hanging out in the bars and drinking, thinking that alcohol was the answer to my solutions. That was just a temporary solution, you know, and everything, because the next morning I'd still have a hangover, you know. And I met a girl in a bar. And because I was still tore up over the girl that was an FBI informant. Met a girl in a bar. I only knew her for 6 weeks and married her. And I learned a lesson. You never marry someone you don't know anything about. Come to find out, she was a practicing witch and in a witch's coven. After I married her, she's out there with her girlfriends dancing naked at night underneath the moonlight around a cauldron and casting spells. You know, and I said, I can't handle that nonsense, you know. So after a couple of months of being married to her, she took, you know, I protested all this witchcraft stuff. She turned around and she filed for divorce. She took me to divorce court and she got the gold mine. I got the shaft, you know, and stuff. I was left penniless, broke, and on the verge of committing suicide.
We're going to have to stop right there, and I want to get to your conversion when we come back from the break, and we'll be right back.
The one place you can count on to deliver the truth. Francis and Friends. We'll be right back on the Sun Life Broadcasting Network.
Francis and Friends is a production of the Sun Life Broadcasting Network. Email questions for today's program to onair@jsm.org. You can also visit our website at francisandfriends.com.
We want to give the phone numbers as well if you'd like to call and ask Brother Johnny Lee Clary a question. And you definitely, the next hour, his testimony of how he got saved is amazing. But the numbers to call are 800-342-8430, or in the UK, 0800-068-8162. You're welcome to call in and get involved in the conversation. And pastors, all you pastors that are watching, I want to recommend that you have Johnny Lee Clary at your churches. You can get to him by his website, www.johnnyleeclary.com, or www.xkkk.com. And you need to schedule him for meetings in your church, and I know it'd be a blessing. But we were talking right before the break, and you'd lost everything and come down to the end.
Came down to the end, and I was just at my point. I didn't know what to do, and I was thinking about committing suicide, and I even loaded a gun, wrote a suicide note and everything, and I looked over and there was a Bible. And I looked at the Bible and I thought, too late now for no Bible. I've sinned, I've done horrible things, how could God forgive me? I promised God I would serve him when I was 9 years old, and I walked away from him. God's not going to forgive me. And I picked up the Bible, and there's no coincidence that it fell open to Luke chapter 15, the story of the prodigal son. And I read about that young man who walked away from his father, went out for riotous living. He spent all of his money. When his money was gone, his friends were gone. They deserted him. That's exactly how I felt. I said, man, I can relate to that. And then he found himself trying to get a job and found himself in the pig pen with a bunch of pigs. Well, that's the way I felt, because, I mean, playing hide the car from the repo man and fixing to get evicted and all that and going to be homeless, I felt like a pig in a pig pen. And I thought, man, I can understand that. And then it says he came to his senses and decided he would go home, humble himself, not worthy to be his father's son anymore, but ask for a job. At least he would have a roof over his head and some food in his belly.
Right.
And he started his journey back home, and his father saw him coming and ran up and threw his arms around him and welcomed him back home. And when I read that, he said, my son who was dead is now alive again. And when I read that, I said, man, that's what I need to do. And I got on my knees and I said, God, I've messed up bad. I need your help. I'll go to church. I'll straighten up. I said that prayer the very next morning. The phone rang, and that was a miracle. My phone was supposed to be shut off. I was $600 behind in my phone bill. And the phone rang. I picked it up. A guy at a car dealership said, you want to come to work for me and sell some cars? Can you start tomorrow? I go, I can start today. And I had $1 in my pocket. I had just enough gas to get there. I showed up, and I sold 2 cars that day, and by the time I left that night, I walked out with $700 in my pocket.
Wow.
And I said, wow, that's it. I said, I'm going to go to church. And that week, I found those old Jimmy Swaggart tapes I had. I used to tape him on VHS, and I found those videotapes and put them in and started watching them again. I went to church on that Sunday. I went down, and, you know, when I first walked into the church, I seen blacks and whites standing there worshiping together, and I almost left. You know, because you don't say one prayer and expect all that hate to go away.
Right, exactly.
You know? I didn't call up Michael Jackson and sing We Are the World with him, you know, all that kind of stuff. And so I'm sitting there thinking, you know, so what am I going to do? And I was fixing to leave, and then I felt, what did that KKK get me, you know, and stuff? It got me almost to death.
Right.
And so I said, I'm going to stay and listen to what this preacher has to say. And I went down to the altar, and I dedicated my whole life to Christ. And I said, God, I'll never leave you ever again. I'm standing firm with you. And that was back in 1990. And I started preaching 1 year later and sharing my testimony.
And you know, the most moving, poignant part of last night's service was when you gave the story about when Pastor Watts was dying and shared that.
Well, Reverend Watts and I, he had me come preach for him in the very same church the Klan had set fire to and that had harassed him and everything else. Reverend Wade Watts asked me to come speak in that church. Wow. I gave the altar call, and this little girl came forward that was about 15 years old, and she goes, I want to know the same Jesus that you know.
Wow.
And I was hugging her, and I was leading her in the prayer, and I was crying, and Reverend Watts was crying. And he got up and he goes, Johnny, how many years ago was that we debated at that radio station? I said, 13 years ago. He said, you remember I showed you a little baby and asked you how you could hate that baby? And the baby smiled at you. I said, yeah. And he goes, well, that's the same baby. Wow. He says that smiled at you all them years before. Now his adopted daughter received Jesus, and that's Tia right there between me and Reverend Watts. And so he and I teamed up, and we traveled together for about 7 years, preaching the gospel and preaching racial reconciliation. And then he passed away, and he called me to his deathbed, and he told me, he said, you just keep preaching, and you preach the love of Jesus Christ, and don't you ever stop doing that. He says, preach the cross and all that. And I said, yes, sir, I will. And I gave the eulogy at his funeral. And when I got done, I watched people file by the casket. And I looked at my friend laying in that casket, all dressed up to go away, but he had a smile on his face. Only 2 people I ever seen had a smile on their face at the funeral was Reverend Watts and my grandmother, you know. And I looked at him, and I patted him on the shoulder. And my job as a head pallbearer was to shut that lid on that coffin, load it in the hearse. But I patted him on the shoulder, and I said, so long. This isn't goodbye. It's just so long for right now. I will see you again. And I bent down, and I kissed him on the forehead. And I guess what I did there was that I fulfilled another promise that was long overdue. I said, because I promised him years before, whatever he did to that chicken, I was going to do to him in that restaurant. So I kept my promise.
Amen.
and so he made a great impact upon my life. And I believe because of the influence of Reverend Watts, I'm a better person today because of knowing a man of another race that showed nothing but the love of Jesus.
Amen. We want you to get involved. Now, if you have questions for Brother Clary, you can call 800-342-8430, or in the UK, 0800-068-8162. We have some emails that have come in, and Betty writes, is there any place in the Bible that condones mixed marriages? Well, let me explain something to you. In the Old Testament, God forbid the mixing of Israel in marriage with the other nations, but it was not because of race or color. It was because of the bloodline that the Messiah would come from. And Satan would try to use the mixing of the races, and these were whites, but nations, to contaminate and pollute the bloodline that would lead to the birth of the Messiah. Now, the question should be, is mixed marriages right or wrong? That's the wrong question. The right question is, what is God's will? It doesn't matter what the color of a person's skin is as far as marriage is concerned. The question is, what is God's will? And if it's God's will for you to marry someone of a different color from you, then who cares what anybody else says? It's what is God's will. Paul would write that there is neither now that we're in Christ, there is neither Jew nor Greek, bond or free, male or female, but we are all one in Jesus Christ.
The only, Donnie, that God will not put his blessings on or tells us not to do is for a believer to marry
an unbeliever. That's
regardless of the color. We're not to marry an unbeliever.
Exactly. Be not unequally yoked. Right. That's what the Scripture tells us. Once again, as we read these emails below, once again, we want you to get involved. If you've got any questions or comments for Brother Clary or for the panel, the numbers to call are 800-342-8430. Once again, that's 800-342-8430. In the UK, it's 0800-068-8162. You're a part of this program today, and we want you to be involved. Phyllis writes to you, I'm wondering how the KKK can claim that they are honoring Jesus Christ as the light of the world when they burn the crosses, and yet they hate Jews. Have they never realized that Jesus Christ is Jewish?
Well, they don't realize it because they twist the Bible around. See, they believe in their mind, their twisted philosophy. They're adding things that's not even in the Bible. You know, they even say that they do this serpent seed theory, and they say that Eve actually had sex with the devil in the garden, and that he impregnated her with the seed of Cain, and then when she slept with Adam, he impregnated her with the seed of Abel, and she gave birth to twin half-brothers. And they said that Cain belonged to Satan, okay? So they say the Jews come out of Satan's bloodline, and they say that's why the Jews killed Jesus. And it's so twisted. It's crazy, you know. But again, they talk about lighting the cross and saying that's a symbol. I want to just say something here on that. The fact is that I did a little study on that, and the first time I ever saw a cross, or ever heard of a cross being lit, was when the Romans used to tie the early Christians to the cross and burn them at the cross. Now, Satan hates Calvary, hates the cross, because the cross set mankind free.
That's right.
So Satan hates the cross so much, he uses the Klan. When they set fire to a cross, it's trying to destroy. It's a symbolism of trying to destroy that cross that sets man free.
Is there a connection between the KKK and Freemasons?
Very much so. The Klan and the Freemasons, there were so many Klansmen that wore the Masonic ring, and some of them were 32nd degree Masons.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they used to hold the meetings in the Masonic lodges. A lot of them, they'd say, okay, well, our Masonic meeting's such and such night, but you can hold your meetings on Thursday nights. When our meetings are on Wednesdays, you can have Thursday, you know. And so the Klan would hold the meetings. And the same guys that were there at the Masonic thing were there inside the Ku Klux Klan.
I knew many Freemasons that was also members of the Ku Klux Klan.
Albert Pike, who was he was
Pike.
a Grand Dragon in the Klan. He helped write the rule book on the Masons. Hiram Evans and Colonel William Simmons, they both were Imperial Wizards, 32nd degree Masons.
And Albert Pike was also a Satanist, a very powerful Satanist.
Very much so.
Yeah, I've read his Rules and Dogmas. I have the book. I found it at a garage sale and bought it. And
yeah, I've read it from cover to cover.
yeah, it's not something that this man was evil. And you know, it's interesting that in Washington, D.C., there's only one monument to a Confederate general, and it's Albert Pike.
Albert Pike.
Because they're the biggest Masonic lodge, I guess, is in Washington.
It's a 33rd degree lodge, the only 33rd degree lodge, and that's an honorary degree. You can't buy it, but the lodge is there in Washington, D.C.
So now, if you're not a 32nd degree or above, so would you be allowed in, or only?
They will make exceptions. Ronald Reagan was given an honorary 33rd degree order, but there are a few exceptions. But generally speaking, for many years, only people of power, generals and former presidents and people in high authority got to that degree. But they started to open it up to some grassroots people, and Jim Shaw was one that they opened it up to, and then God saved him and brought him out of it, and he wrote a book. It's very interesting, entitled The Deadly Deception by Jim Shaw. It's a little paperback. It's really easy to read, and he tells some stuff in there that Freemasons that claim to be Christians, you need to read.
Well, what is shocking, and I know we'll get some negative mail about this, but the amount of Freemasons pastors in the Southern Baptist Convention,
and other churches too, but more prevalent in the Southern Baptist, yes.
and that are members of the Masonic Masons and their deacon boards.
Absolutely, and I used to have an article. This was several years ago, so I'm sure it's changed, of the percentage of pastors in the Southern Baptist Convention that was Masons, and the percentage of deacons was high.
Oh, I know. I got an email a couple of years ago from a Southern Baptist pastor who had gone to their state convention. I guess they have a state convention every year for their, and we had been talking about, it was during the time we had did that series on Masons, and he wrote me, he said, I was shocked at the number of pastors I saw wearing the Masonic Lodge ring. And he said, I didn't believe y'all, because he said, I'm not a member, I don't believe in it, it's a secret society. But he said, I was shocked at the number of pastors that I saw that were open about their affiliation with Masonic Lodge. We, once again, to give the phone numbers to call, and I'm surprised we have not had more phone calls, but 800-342-8430. In the UK, it's 0800-068-8162. Well, we got our first call. Rick from Missouri, you're on the air. Hello, what can we do for you?
Well, sir, I'm a retired pharmacist, and I would just like to say the hatred for the black and white goes back very far, but the only difference between a black and white person, an African American and a Caucasian, is melanin. It's the hormone melanin in their skin, and there is no difference. In fact, I believe I heard one time a pastor say that Noah's 3 children, one of those children was African American, one was Caucasian, and one was the yellow race.
No,
I believe that's correct.
No, all the races came from the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, but they were white.
Right.
But through their lineage came the Oriental race, the black race, the white race, the brown race, as time came. But they were white in the beginning. But Ham is the one that the Bible says that his people inhabited. The Cushites were the first inhabitants of Ham. And they were inhabitants of Africa, and for whatever reason, in God's timing and providence.
Well, Ethiopians sure weren't Caucasian.
No, exactly. But this was after the flood, so blacks were already here, but all the races derived from Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But you're right about it's just skin color. That's the only difference.
That's the only difference. And look at the amount of bloodshed and heartache. And, you know, just think about the fact that the blacks weren't even educated in the white schools. You know, I would like to turn it around on the Caucasians and say, okay, all the Caucasians 6 feet and taller cannot be educated in Penn State University. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. You're discriminating against them because they're over a certain height, and that's what. But you know, Johnny Lee said it very eloquently last night that we fear what we don't know.
Exactly.
And
the fear of the unknown. And what does fear do?
But the reality is, what would this nation be without the influence of all the nationalities? Every nationality has brought the flavor of this country that makes us what we are. And whether they came from Europe, whether they've come from Africa, whether they came from Asia, and our nation owes a debt of gratitude. When you look at the taming of the Old West, the transcontinental rail lines would not have been built without Chinese laborers. And so, you know, and they were not treated fairly, but the fact of the matter is this country was built on the sweat and labor, not just of whites, but of blacks, of Asians, of all different nationalities. But thank you for calling, Rick, and thank you for sharing that. Robert from Illinois, you're on the air.
Yes, sir. How you doing, sir?
Fine. What can we do for you today?
Yes, sir. Just wanted to ask brother Johnny if, you know, the times that we live in right now is, do we actually, what does he think? Does he think that we have witches and, you know, Masons, Ku Klux Klans in these high positions right now?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes, they're there, and they've never gone away. And, you know, you have people that's practicing witchcraft, even in the music industry. It's huge in the music industry.
Yes,
you've got, they're having such an influence upon the youth. And then the Ku Klux Klan, they got smart several years ago. They realized that they wasn't going to get a huge bunch of people joining a group called the KKK, okay? So they've changed the names of their organization, but the message is still the same. It's kind of like old Shakespeare said about a rose. A rose by any other name is still a rose, and the Klan by any other name is still the Klan. Right. And so they changed their name, but the message is the same.
Yeah, you know, you would have to be deaf, dumb, blind, and totally ignorant of the world not to recognize that Washington and the state houses in different positions, not saying governors or not saying that at all, but there are, from the White House to the courthouse, that our whole infrastructure has been infected with people that are involved in things that are evil and corrupt, whether it's racism, whether it's witchcraft, whether it's Wicca, no matter what it may be. So we've got to understand that. Evil, you know, evil doesn't come along carrying a pitchfork with a tail, but it comes in wearing a nice suit of clothes and carrying a law book or carrying a Bible.
Very educated, yes.
Very educated, yes. And we've got to understand
that. But, you know, many of our presidents have been Freemasons, and I've read Obama is one, and the other says no, he's not. But you know, you hear that, but I don't know.
Well, his administration is so bad. That's the least of his problems if he's a Mason.
Yeah. Four United States presidents have been purported members of the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Oh, Woodrow Wilson. Yeah. And he endorsed The Birth of a Nation, which was a movie.
Well, Woodrow, you know, listen to this. Woodrow Wilson was the son of a Presbyterian minister from Virginia. And he became president of Princeton University. Right. Woodrow Wilson, get this, in the court, he's the only man in the space of 18 months who had never ran for public office of any kind. In 18 months, he went from the presidency of Princeton to the governor of New Jersey to the president of the United States. Woodrow Wilson is the first man to coin and use the term, I am a progressive, which is just a code word for I'm a liberal. And when World War I ended, and the Versailles Treaty was signed in Versailles, France. Woodrow Wilson is the one that literally took pen in hand and just restarted changing borders of countries. And many of the hostilities that we have seen in the 90s in Eastern Europe between Muslims and Christians and Serbs and all these other things are because of Woodrow Wilson changing borders and taking ethnic groups that never got along and putting them side by side. Yeah. I just finished reading Woodrow, the latest biography on Woodrow Wilson, and I consider him one of the worst presidents in the history of the United States of America, that did more damage to further the liberal agenda in America than any other president.
But there's some that also says that he was put in the White House to sign the Federal Reserve Act that has destroyed this country more than anything else.
He had, let me tell you, in reading Wilson's biography, he had a messianic complex. He thought, he literally believed that he was divinely chosen by God to be the president of the United States and to change this nation.
You know, Bush said the same thing. The last Bush, he said the
look,
same thing.
I got a problem when I hear we're in an election year. When I hear these people get up and say, God told me to run, I want to run the other way.
Yeah.
What
God told him.
Yeah,
which one?
Exactly right. Exactly right. Before we go to Larry in Iowa, Reba writes, thank you so much for your beautiful and powerful testimony, Brother Clary. My mother grew up surrounded by racial indifference and was harboring hatred deep inside of her heart. She is watching the program right now, and I wish you were here to see how touched she is right at this moment.
Hallelujah.
And the Holy Spirit is healing her wounds.
Wow.
And I believe she is finally letting go of this evil seed that has been allowed to have root in her heart. And God bless you in your ministry, and thank Francis for me for inviting Brother Clary. Well, that's a impact that you just had right now on somebody. And I was raised, I'm a Southerner. I mean, and I'm proud of this. I'm proud that I'm a Southerner. But the South was wrong.
Yeah, there was.
And I remember I was rudely told that I was not welcome in a particular Pentecostal church in South Carolina a few years ago when I was preaching, because it was right at the height of when they were arguing over the state, running the Confederate flag at the state capitol. And I was preaching, and it wasn't in my notes or anything, but I just stopped and said, something bothers me. I said, why are you people honoring a flag that stands for racism? And man, you talking about quiet. I said, I'm a Southerner. I'm born and bred a Southerner. But I said, if I lived during the Civil War and I had the knowledge of the Bible that I have now, there's absolutely no way that I could fight for the Confederacy. And I said, don't give me this arguing over states' rights. We know what the right was that they were fighting over, to own slaves. And no nation can be great when they mistreat another part of their citizenry as subhumans. God cannot bless a nation like that. And I mean, it got deathly quiet, and needless to say, they let me know real quick I'd never be invited back. But when they said that, I said, I didn't say it to their face, but I left knowing these are a bunch of racists. They're not saved. They can say they're Pentecostal, they can dance, they can shout, but they're racist. And they're not saved. And I've never, I was raised in a home that if a racial epithet came out of my mouth, Dr. Spock wouldn't allow this, but man, my dad would pop me across the face.
Really?
I mean, that was not allowed. My dad taught me, we don't judge people by the color of their skin. We judge people by the content of their heart. And he said, there's evil in every single nationality.
Everyone, yes.
And there is good in every single nationality. Therefore, you are to make your opinion and judgment based on not the color of the skin or their socioeconomic standing, but the content of their character. Larry from Iowa, you're on the air real quick. We're up against a hard break. What's your question?
Yeah, I was just, when you read that email, Donnie,
yeah,
that you said that, well, it got anything to do with black people. I'm married to a nice black lady. I ain't got nothing against black people. God created us all. And Johnny, I got a question for you. When you said you were saved,
Yes, sir.
and you said you were saved, did you ever speak in tongues when you were saved?
Yes, I got the baptism of the Holy Ghost, and absolutely, it was the, you know, I did a lot of things that, I turned to a lot of drugs in my lifetime to try to, you know, like drinking booze. I never got into real heavy drugs, but I was like drinking booze, smoking pot and stuff, trying to get high. The best high I ever got was when I got the baptism of the Holy Ghost, and I didn't have a hangover the next day.
Amen. Amen.
I felt like I was walking on water.
Amen.
I didn't either. I was speaking in tongues after I got saved, and then I was watching Jimmy Swagger singing that one song about the river.
There's a river.
The river never dries.
Yeah, there's a river that shall never run dry.
And then when you said, after you was one day you was preaching, and you said that when people come to the world, come into the world for all people, and that's what I loved you when you said that.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that, Larry. We got to take a break. We'll be right back. We want you to get involved. We're going to go to Ruth in Scotland in just a moment, and but we want you involved. The numbers to call are 800-342-8430. That's the U.S. toll-free. In the United Kingdom, it's 0800-068-8162. We'll be right back.
Thank you for your prayers and financial support. Francis and Friends. We'll be right back on the Sun Life Broadcasting Network.
Francis and Friends is a production of the Sun Life Broadcasting Network. Email questions for today's program to onair@jsm.org. You can also visit our website at francisandfriends.com.
Before we go to Ruth in Scotland, I know that we've got scores of African American pastors that are watching the program today, and I would encourage you to prayerfully consider having Brother Clary come and minister to your congregation as a living example of what the power and the blood of Jesus Christ can do in a heart and in a life. Well, from Scotland, we have Ruth on the line. Ruth, hello. Ruth, are you there?
Hi.
Yes, ma'am. What can we do for you?
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air. What's your question?
Oh, hi. It's a bad line. I'm sorry. Hi, I'm Pastor Donahue. I'd like to speak with
yes,
Brother Johnny, please.
Ask him your question. Go ahead.
Hi, Brother Johnny.
Hello, how you doing, Ruth?
I'm blessed, thank you. I sat up watching you give your testimony last night till 2 a.m. this morning, and what a blessing it was.
Wow.
Thank you.
And you're a precious brother, you know, and the Lord, He's going to use you mightily, I believe, in the future. And I was surprised to hear you'd been to Scotland, because most of the ministers in America go to London. And it blessed me to hear you'd been to Scotland. So I would like to hear, can you tell me a little bit where you were and which areas you were in?
I was in Portadown, I was in Armagh and Belfast, and that was back in 1994. And I'd love to come back to Scotland. I really, there's a lot of work. I haven't been over there since '94, and I would love to come back. Actually, I was there in '96 too. I'm sorry, '94 and '96, and I would love to come back to Scotland. And I'm all about getting souls saved. Actually, I want to go all over America, wherever anybody will have me, because I believe in getting souls saved. And no matter what color they are, we need to break down these barriers, and we need to preach the cross. I've gone from burning the cross to preaching the cross,
Amen.
and people need to hear that.
Hey Ruth, I've preached in Scotland too. I've preached in Peterborough a while back.
Scotland and the Ku Klux Klan, and I was like wondering, I was saying to the Lord, well, what is that? Because I've never heard of that. And it was like the Masonic, the link. Is that where it comes from?
Well, the KKK and the Masonic Lodge are two separate organizations. The KKK started after the American Civil War in Pulaski, Tennessee. And as some former Confederate soldiers, generals, and trying to not wanting the war to be over and being scared of what they perceived as the black man now having rights that they didn't have before, and that's how the KKK was formed in Pulaski, Tennessee. The Masons go back much, hundreds and hundreds of years further back, but
they overlap. Their
but
memberships
all
overlap.
Snakes cross.
Yeah,
all snakes eventually will cross. Thank you, Ruth. We got to run. Gary from Tennessee, you're on the air.
Yeah, how you doing, Donnie?
Fine.
Listen, I was calling in regards to your the brother that you have there. It's so close to my family. In East Tennessee, all of my uncles was in the Ku Klux Klan.
Wow.
And when he mentioned the pastor who had that child that was mixed, it brought back this with me. My grandfather was so against the race, and but yet he adopted my cousin, whose name was Willie, and he was a mixed child, and he adopted he adopted that child, and I just wondered what would have made him do that, because as far as for me and this side of the family, we never had that prejudice in us.
Well, again, hatred is a learned response. You're not born with it. Someone teaches it to you. And that's why people have this prejudice. That's why your uncles joined the Klan. Someone had to teach them that type of hatred. And that's why it's important that we teach the love of God in the Word of God. The cure for racism is this right here. It's called the cross, preaching the cross. At the cross, racism stops and hatred stops because the blood of Jesus gets rid of it.
That's right. Thank you, Gary. Brother Johnny, what was Reverend Watt's initial reaction when you told him you were now born again?
When I first called him, he said, "Oh, I knew that was going to happen." He goes, "I've been praying for you for a long time." And stuff. So he knew.
Sandra from South Carolina, you're on the air. Sandra.
Yes, Johnny, I would like to ask you about your grandmother. Was she still living when you gave your heart to Jesus?
She sure was, and she got to see me as a preacher for 5 years before she died, and I preached her funeral. And so I was, gave the eulogy at her funeral, and she was. I prayed for her right before she died. She had a hearing problem, and she goes, "I want you to pray that I get my hearing back." And she came to me for that. And I got to tell you, my grandmother just loved the Lord with all of her heart. And that was a happy moment in her life, is to see her grandson get saved.
Wow, that's great.
Thank you, Sandra. Once again, let me give the numbers before we go to Odell. If you'd like to call in the U.S., the toll-free number is 800-342-8430. In the UK, it's 0800-068-8162. This email just came in. Brother Clary, I really enjoyed hearing your testimony. I'm an African-American in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and through your testimony, I understand how you were raised with that mentality, but really enjoyed hearing that a black man was key in your conversion to Jesus Christ. It encouraged me to display more love when I'm faced with a negative spirit against the color of my skin. Do you believe that there is still a prejudiced spirit that is heavy in Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Absolutely. Tulsa's very racially divided. I lived there for years, and in Tulsa right now, they have a ministerial alliance on the north part of Tulsa that's the Black Ministerial Alliance. They don't call it black, they call it like North Tulsa Ministerial Alliance. And then in the south part, they've got another ministerial alliance. And the truth of the matter is, we need to get rid of all this black alliances and blackness and white this, this is crazy. The thing about it is, there's one church, one Lord, right, one faith, one baptism, one Father of all, who is over all, through all, and in all, okay? Acts 17:26, from one blood, God made, that's Ephesians 4:5, by the way, and then Acts 17:26, from one blood God made all nations. The word nations comes from the Greek word ethnos, meaning ethnic, meaning race, okay? Mm-hmm. So from one blood God made all races of people. Now, if you got a hammer and you're hammering and you hit your thumb with the hammer, your first reaction is not to drop that hammer and grab a knife and cut off your thumb.
No.
Your first reaction is you grab that thumb because that's part of the body comforting the other part of the body. Our first reaction should be when we see somebody hurting is not to look at the color of their skin, but to comfort that brother and sister in the body of Christ. And there's where we got to get to. We got to get this message out all over the world.
Right.
Odell from South Carolina, you're on the air.
Yes, Brother Clary, I just want to know if you felt like, I'm from South Carolina, as it says, and I was raised in a small country town called Cowpens here in South Carolina.
Cowpens, okay.
And the Ku Klux Klan was pretty rampant back when I was a young boy, and I seen some pretty terrible things going on. And I was just wondering if you think the Klan targets these small town, country towns especially, to, draw from.
In the South, they're very much, they figure it's a lot easier to go into a small town, but they target, everything's open for the Klan. They go into the bigger towns, especially where there's interracial areas and there's gang activity, and, it gives the Klan, especially if you've got minority gangs like Mexican or black gangs like the Crips and the Bloods or the MS-13, and they're out there dealing drugs and terrorizing people, breaking into homes, raping people. That gives the Klan an excuse to come in, and they go, aha, see, that's why you white people need to come with us. We've got to realize that it's not a skin problem, it is a sin problem.
It's a heart problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
The answer to the problem of race is grace.
Let's go to Reginald from England. You're on the air, Reginald.
Hello, this is Reginald from East London. I'd like to speak to John Clary, please.
You got him. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, brother, I remember when you came to East London to preach for our church, and I was doing the tapes, and many people were asking for the tapes of your recording. And when you came, you also sang a song about the achy breaky heart.
Yeah, I remember that. I used to sing years ago. I don't anymore.
Oh, that's a shame. We really loved the Christian words you put in there. Did you put those words in?
I put the, no, actually someone else wrote them and I just sang them, but it said, let Jesus heal your achy breaky heart. Billy Ray Cyrus talked about some other kind of healing. The kind of healing I was talking about was let Jesus heal your achy breaky heart.
Amen. Yeah, it was a very good song, and we certainly loved you the time when you came over.
Oh,
and before I go, I'd also like to say I'm a big fan of Jimmy Swaggart over the years, and I love the program.
Well, thank you so much, Reginald. We appreciate that. And I'm going to be in London in August.
Okay.
Preaching.
Which part of East London? Which part of London?
You go to my website, DonnieSwaggart.org, and just click on the calendar for August, and it'll give you all the information of where I'm going to be preaching.
We'll look out for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you tell me what scripture did you find in the Bible that all men were white from the beginning? Can you please explain? Well, you just go to Genesis chapter 11. That's where the Tower of Babel, that's where the language was confused, and that's where we begin to see people begin to line up and nations beginning to form and the colors begin to come into effect. But Abraham is the father of us all, and Abraham was white. There's no getting around that, Jim.
Yeah, sure.
And when God said, let us go down and make man in our own image, and we know Jesus was a Jew, Jesus was white. I'm sorry, I know we've got some precious African-American brothers and sisters who try to, put pictures of a black Jesus on the screen, but that's wrong. Jesus was a Jew, and Jews were not black. They were white.
Right.
And so that's where, but Genesis 11 is where the language was confused, the Tower of Babel, and then we begin to see the ethnicities of different nations coming together and the colors of skin beginning to change. Ed from Kentucky, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good morning, gang. May God bless SBN for, continue.
Thank you.
For Johnny Lee, I caught the testimony last night, and he had a most important part about a church where he had approached. He had to go to preach there, and it was a black church, one I believe he tried to burn, and a certain young lady received Christ. If he has time, could he recap that for
Eddie's already told it.
World this morning?
Eddie told it already a few minutes ago.
I was holding. I'm sorry. I missed
yeah, he shared.
Thank you very much, guys.
He shared that. Wasn't that powerful? That was a Bible. Thank you, Ed. My name is Andrea. Would you ask Johnny who were the other presidents who were involved in the KKK or Freemasons?
Calvin Coolidge, Warren G. Harding. He was sworn into the Klan in the Oval Office. And the last one was Harry S. Truman. However, Truman was a member of the Klan for about 6 months, and he renounced the Klan and said the only reason he joined, because back in them days, in order to get votes, the Klan was controlling a huge part of Missouri, and he said you had to be a member of the Klan or you wasn't going to get on the ballot. And so he said he only did it to get on the ballot, but he hated the Ku Klux Klan and to test them, so he did renounce the KKK on Truman's behalf, but that was the 4 presidents who belonged to the Klan.
Thank you. Where is it written that the Jews are white in the Bible?
There's a list, and let me just go back to this. He wanted to know the Freemasons, and there's a list.
Let's answer the question.
Okay.
Where is it written that the Jews are white in the Bible? What color are Jews today in Israel? Have you ever been to Israel? They're white.
Good answer.
And that Moses was white, according to Donnie's comment. You know, that question is so silly, and for that's a silly question. That really is, and that's really probably written from somebody who has racial prejudice.
Oh, yeah.
And whatever. Ruth Ann from Kentucky, you're on the air.
Hello. Good morning.
Yes.
I just had the question of how big Johnny thinks the Klan is still today and nationally.
The FBI, I work with the FBI. I go lecture there at their training academy in Quantico, Virginia. And the FBI has been trying to monitor it, and so has other organizations. But the FBI figures right now there's well over, and I mean just off the top of my head, well over 1,000 organizations in America that are either the name of the Ku Klux Klan or they're using another name, and also neo-Nazis and different white supremacist groups, and their membership totals well over 1 million. Okay.
The second part of my question is not really a question, but watching you last night hit home with me so hard that because I grew up in a Southern Baptist family, and all the elders in my family were deacons, they were Masons, they were racist. My dad run a business, a clothing business and furniture business, and he had some blacks that would come in and patronize his store, and us kids worked there in the store, and a black family would come in, and they had the cutest little twins you ever saw in your life, and I, of course, would love on them and play with them while their mom shopped. And they left one day, and Dad said the N-word, you know, I wish you would quit messing and loving on those little N-word babies. And I turned around to him, and I said, well, Dad, it's okay for you to take their money, though. And I can tell you, I got a good belt whipping over that one. But
well, good answer, Ruth Ann.
I think that my family, it was a learned thing down through the generations. I think if you ask one of them, what do you have against a black person? I don't think they could really tell you.
They don't. They can't.
They just were learned. That's just what they were taught. But my dad was a 33-degree Mason and the youngest one. And so were all of my grandpa's great uncles, and they were deacons in the Southern Baptist Church. So I was raised that way, but I got saved at 6 years old, and I knew more about how the Lord really meant things to be than all the adults in my family. And I praise God for that, and I praise God for you, Johnny.
Thank
and
you.
You too in the ministry. We love you, Donnie.
Thank y'all so much. And I got this email from Joanne. Joanne, I'm not going to read your email, all of it. And I never said that all Southerners were racist. Did y'all hear me say that?
You never said that.
I never said that. I'm a Southerner. So if I said all Southerners are racist, I would be saying I am racist.
That's ridiculous.
And and Joanne, you know what I said. And this is really silly to write something like that and say, don't put us all in the same barrel. I did not put all Southerners in the same barrel. Didn't even apply
I'm a Southerner
that.
too. Listen to my accent.
Yeah, so that's not really, I'm really offended by that, and because I made no implication that all Southerners were racist. I am a Southerner, and I'm a proud Southerner. Steve from Ohio, you're on the air.
Hey, how you, Donnie?
Fine.
I had a chance to meet you up in Heritage, Ohio.
Okay.
And we've talked a couple times. I'm the big bike minister that talked about the Klan. You was the one telling me about David Duke, was right down the street from you.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I want to talk to Johnny and thank him for his testimony. And I want to say, turn it down, please. We are in real hardcore bike ministry, and we deal with all this. One of the Grand Wizards comes up here from Kentucky, and he has the blue flag where the skinheads have been integrated. And he's been on National Geographic, and I'm so grateful for your testimony because the church, by and large, thinks a lot of this stuff has just kind of fell by the wayside.
But it hadn't.
That's right. And when you get out and deal in the hardcore bike world, I seen Freemason patches yesterday riding motorcycles. I see the occult. I see witchcraft. I see Ku Klux Klan. I see Nazis. I see skinheads. It's all out there. And, brother, your testimony has to go forward. Downey, I commend you for trying to help this brother get some bookings.
Well, like we said, whether you're white, Hispanic, African-American, Asian, if you're a pastor of a church and you're watching, you need to have Johnny Lee Clary come and minister at your church. And thank you, Steve, for calling. And we're running out of time. If you want to make a couple minutes left, if you want to make a call, 800-342-8430. UK 0800-068-8162. Phillips writes and says, Brother Johnny, have you seen any of your other former KKK members repent and get saved and turn from their racism?
I sure have, and I was on one Christian talk show here in America. It's pretty popular, and I was on there and I was giving my testimony, and I got a phone call from the secretary of the Grand Dragon of Texas, and she said, I just gave my heart to Jesus when you led us in the salvation prayer, and she goes, help me get out of the Klan. I don't want to come back into this office. All right. It was great.
Is there, Joseph writes, is there any such thing as an Ethiopian black Jew? There was a group of Ethiopians in the 1980s who claimed that they were descendants of Moses and the woman that... Solomon, I'm sorry.
And Queen of Sheba.
Queen of Sheba, and that they had converted to Judaism. And Israel went and repatriated them and brought them over to Israel.
Yeah,
and I have seen some of their kin, the original ones. A lot of them died now, but I have actually seen some of them there. When Moses married a dark-skinned woman from Ethiopia, Miriam spoke up because it was turned into a leper. Yes, we know.
That's what happened.
And I'm from South Carolina, from the town of Cowpens, also where one of the callers was from. I'm a black man married to a white female. What Brother Clary is witnessing and testifying about present is something that I've wanted the African-American race to see since I was a child. With fear of being ostracized, I kept my mouth shut. This brother is a godsend, and just listening to him has inspired me to talk to my pastor of an African-American church to invite this man to come speak to us. And I would love to commit myself to helping Brother Clary spread this message of saving souls, no matter what race they are. Does Brother Clary have an email? Would you mind?
Yes, my email is outlawpreacher@yahoo.com.
All right.
Or Clary@johnnyleeclary.com. You go to my website and be able to email me from there, but outlawpreacher@yahoo.com is pretty easy to remember. But, I do want to say that, I'm a member of Family Worship Center right here in Baton Rouge, and Pastor Donahue and Pastor Jimmy Swaggart are my pastors, okay? And me and my wife are moving here to Baton Rouge, and I want to see every church. I would love to see every church like this one. If you look into when you watch Family Worship Center, if you look out in that audience, you see black and white, and they're all sitting together. Hispanic. There's people of all different races. Asians out there. People all mixed together and sitting together, and that's what heaven's going to look like. Read Revelation 7:9 and see if I'm not right, because John saw every race standing before the throne, and that's what I want to get. We got to get past this black and white church bit, and we need to let. And I can't think of a better role model church than Family Worship Center in Baton Rouge. When you take a look and see all them different colors of people sitting together and calling each other brother and sister, don't you know that makes God proud? And that's what I want to do for I want to be just a part of that for the world.
If you looked at our ushers and our greeters and all of those and that type, they're of every color. Got to go. Thank Brother Johnny Lee Clary for being our guest today. Please go to his website, johnnyleeclary.com. And once again, pastors, if you want to have a great weekend, you need to have Brother Clary come and minister to your church. He will be a blessing to you. Thank you for watching today, and keep tuning in to Sun Life Broadcasting. Today's programming will be a blessing to you.
Thanks for joining us today for Francis and Friends. Email questions and comments for today's program to onair@jsm.org. Podcasts of previous programs can be listened to on our website at francisandfriends.com. Francis and Friends airs live weekday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central, and replays weekday evenings on the Sun Life Radio Network and on television on the Sun Life Broadcasting Network. Francis and Friends is a production of the Sun Life Broadcasting Network.